My name is Lucille, and I am 58 years old. I have lived alone in a small town in Ohio for longer than I care to count. For years, I dreamed of the day my only son would find love and start a family of his own. When that day finally arrived, I thought it would be the happiest moment of my life. Instead, I received 5 words that shattered my heart into 1,000 pieces. "Just stay in your lane, Lucille." And the person who said it was not a stranger. She was about to become my daughter-in-law. Before I share what happened next, I would love to know where you are watching from today. Drop your city or country in the comments below. If this story touches your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Now let me take you back to where this all began so you can understand why those 5 words changed everything. To truly understand why that moment hurt so deeply, you need to know who I am and where I came from. My story is not unique, but it is mine, and every scar I carry has shaped the woman I have become. 31 years ago, my life looked completely different. I was married to a man named Harold, a construction worker with calloused hands and the gentlest soul I have ever known. We lived in a modest house on the outskirts of Columbus, Ohio. Nothing fancy, just a 2-bedroom place with a small yard where our son Marcus liked to chase fireflies in the summer evenings. Harold worked long hours, sometimes leaving before sunrise and returning after dark, but he never complained. He used to say that a man's job was to provide for his family, and he did that with every ounce of strength he had. Marcus was 7 years old that autumn, a bright, energetic boy with his father's smile and my stubborn streak. He loved superheroes, chocolate chip pancakes, and climbing the old oak tree in our backyard, even though I told him 100 times it was too tall. That October morning started like any other. Harold kissed me goodbye, ruffled Marcus's hair, and headed out the door with his lunch pail in hand. I remember standing at the kitchen window, watching his truck disappear down the street, never imagining that would be the last time I would see him alive. The accident happened just after noon. Scaffolding collapsed at the construction site. 3 men fell. 2 survived with injuries. Harold did not. He died before the ambulance could even reach the hospital. I remember exactly where I was standing when I found out. In the kitchen, holding a dish towel, thinking about what to make for dinner. The doorbell rang, and when I opened the door, 2 police officers stood on my porch with their hats in their hands and sorrow in their eyes. Before they even spoke, I knew. A wife knows. I felt the ground shift beneath my feet, felt the air leave my lungs, felt my entire world collapse in the span of a heartbeat. The weeks that followed were a blur of grief and disbelief. I had to explain to my 7-year-old son why his daddy was never coming home. I had to sit through a funeral and accept condolences from people whose faces I could barely see through my tears. I had to figure out how to survive in a world that suddenly felt impossibly cruel. After the initial shock, faded reality set in, hard and fast. Harold was gone, and I was alone with a child to raise and bills to pay. The construction company offered a settlement, a sum of money that was supposed to compensate for a life. It was not much by most standards, but it was something. I could have used that money to make our lives easier. I could have paid off the house, bought a nicer car, taken Marcus on a vacation. But I did not touch a single dollar. I put every cent into a savings account and promised myself that money would be for Marcus's future, for his education, his wedding, his first home, whatever he needed when the time came. Instead of relying on that settlement, I went to work. I found a job as an administrative assistant at a dental office, answering phones, scheduling appointments, filing paperwork. The pay was decent, but not enough, so I took a second job working the evening shift as a cashier at a grocery store. My days started at 6 in the morning and often did not end until 11 at night. I was exhausted in ways I cannot even describe. My feet ached constantly. My back hurt from standing for hours. Some nights I was so tired I could barely keep my eyes open on the drive home. But I never let Marcus see me struggle. Every night, no matter how late I got home, I checked his homework. Every morning, no matter how early I had to leave, I packed his lunch with a little note telling him I loved him. I learned to function on 4 hours of sleep. I learned to smile when I wanted to cry. I learned that a mother's love is not just a feeling, but an action, a choice you make every single day to put your child first. There were so many things I gave up during those years. Friends invited me to dinners and movies and weekend trips, but I always said no. I did not have the time or the money, and frankly, I did not have the energy. Men showed interest in dating me, good men who might have made my life less lonely, but I turned them all down. Marcus was my priority. My only priority. I did not want him to feel like he was competing for my attention. I wanted him to know that he was enough, that he was everything, and he thrived. Despite losing his father so young, Marcus grew into a remarkable young man. He was kind, hardworking, and determined. He earned a partial scholarship to Ohio State University, and I covered the rest with money I had scraped together over the years. I sat in the audience at his graduation watching him walk across that stage in his cap and gown, and I cried tears of pure joy. All those sleepless nights, all those aching feet, all those missed opportunities for myself, they were all worth it in that single moment. After graduation, Marcus landed a job as a software engineer at a tech company in Columbus. He got his own apartment, bought a decent car, built a life for himself. And through it all, he never forgot his mother. He called me every Sunday without fail. He came home for dinner at least once a month. He still called me Ma in that affectionate tone that made my heart swell. We had a bond that only people who have weathered storms together can truly understand. So when Marcus told me he had met someone special, I was overjoyed. My son deserved happiness. He deserved love. And I was ready to welcome whoever made him smile into our family with open arms. Marcus introduced me to Brianna about 2 years before the wedding plans began. I remember that day vividly, every detail etched into my memory like a photograph I wish I could forget. She was 28 years old, worked in marketing at some advertising agency downtown. The moment she walked into my living room, I noticed how polished she looked. Her dark brown hair was styled in perfect waves that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Her nails were manicured with some kind of fancy design. Her clothes looked expensive, the kind you see in magazine advertisements, but never in small-town Ohio. I had cleaned my house from top to bottom before their visit, scrubbed the floors, dusted every surface, arranged fresh flowers from my garden on the kitchen table. My home is not fancy, never has been, but it is clean and comfortable and filled with love. At least that is what I always believed. Brianna walked in and looked around with an expression I could not quite name at first. Later, I would recognize it for what it was, judgment. Her eyes swept over my older furniture, my outdated curtains, the family photos in mismatched frames on the wall. She sat down on my sofa gingerly as if afraid something might stain her designer skirt. I tried to make conversation asking about her work, her interests, her family. She talked mostly about herself, which I did not mind at first. She mentioned the big clients she managed the campaigns. She had created the apartment she was renting in the nicest part of the city. When I asked about her parents, her face hardened slightly. "We are not close," she said, and that was the end of that topic. I served coffee and homemade apple pie, my grandmother's recipe that I had been making for over 40 years. Brianna took one small bite, smiled politely, and pushed the plate aside. "I am watching my sugar intake," she explained. Marcus ate 3 slices the way he always did, but something about the way Brianna watched him doing it made me uncomfortable. After they left, I told myself I was being silly. Young people today are different, that is all. They have different priorities, different lifestyles. It did not mean anything that Brianna seemed uninterested in my home, my food, my stories. She was just nervous about meeting her boyfriend's mother. Things would improve once she got to know me better. Over the next 2 years, I saw Brianna maybe a dozen times. Each visit, I tried harder than the last to connect with her. I invited them for dinners, carefully researching recipes she might enjoy. I asked thoughtful questions about her career. I remembered details from previous conversations and brought them up to show I was paying attention. Nothing worked. One Thanksgiving, I spent 2 days preparing a traditional dinner. Turkey with all the trimmings, homemade cranberry sauce, 3 different pies. Brianna arrived, surveyed the spread, and announced she had become vegetarian. She spent most of the meal on her phone while Marcus and I ate in uncomfortable silence. Another time, I drove 2 hours to a craft fair to find a special gift for her birthday, a beautiful handmade leather journal since she had mentioned wanting to start writing more. When I gave it to her, she glanced at it briefly, said thank you without meeting my eyes, and I later saw it sitting on a shelf in their apartment, still in its original wrapping, gathering dust. The hardest moment came when I gave her the scarf I had spent 3 months knitting. Deep burgundy wool, soft and warm, with an intricate cable pattern that had taken me countless hours to perfect. I handed it to her with such hope in my heart. She took it, smiled that tight little smile I was beginning to recognize, and thanked me. A week later, I visited their apartment and found the scarf crumpled in a bag of items marked for donation. I never said anything to Marcus about my concerns. He seemed happy, and that was what mattered. I told myself that Brianna and I simply had different personalities, different backgrounds, different ways of showing affection. Not every daughter-in-law and mother-in-law become best friends. I could accept a cordial relationship if it meant my son was loved and cared for. But deep down in a place I did not want to examine too closely, I was beginning to wonder if Brianna saw me as anything more than an obstacle to be tolerated. Then came the phone call that changed everything. It was a Tuesday evening in early spring. I was in my garden planting the tomatoes I grew every year when my phone rang. Marcus's name appeared on the screen, and I answered with dirt still on my hands. "Ma," he said, and I could hear the excitement in his voice. "I asked Brianna to marry me. She said yes." I dropped my gardening trowel and burst into tears. Happy tears, overwhelmed tears, the kind of tears only a mother cries when her child takes a major step toward his future. All my reservations about Brianna evaporated in that moment. This was my son's chosen partner, the woman he wanted to spend his life with. I would find a way to make it work. "Oh, sweetheart," I said through my sobs, "I am so happy for you, both of you. Whatever you need for the wedding, I want to help. I have some money saved and I want to contribute." Marcus thanked me, his voice thick with emotion. But then he paused, and I noticed a hesitation that I should have paid more attention to. "Ma Brianna has very specific ideas about the wedding. Let me talk to her first, okay?" I agreed, not thinking much of it. Every bride has a vision for her special day. That was normal, expected. I was just happy to be included in whatever way I could be. Looking back now, I realized that pause should have been my warning sign, but I was too blinded by joy to see the storm clouds gathering on the horizon. The invitation to the first wedding planning meeting came about a month after the engagement announcement. Brianna sent a formal email, the kind you might send to a business associate rather than your future mother-in-law. It included a date, time, and address, along with a note that said we would be discussing preliminary concepts and budget allocations. I spent the entire week before that meeting preparing. I bought a new dress, something tasteful and understated, that I hoped would make a good impression. I put together a notebook filled with ideas I had gathered over the years, little things I had saved from magazines and websites, thinking someday my son might get married and I could offer suggestions. I also retrieved something precious from my jewelry box, my mother's wedding ring. The ring was not valuable in terms of money. A simple white gold band with a modest diamond worn thin from years on my mother's finger. But its sentimental worth was immeasurable. My grandmother had given it to my mother on her wedding day. My mother had given it to me on mine. I had always planned to pass it to my future daughter-in-law, whoever she might be. The tradition meant everything to me. I arrived at Marcus and Brianna's apartment right on time, my heart full of hope, and my notebook clutched in my hands. The door opened, and I was greeted not by my son, but by a woman I had never met. She was about 60 years old, impeccably dressed in designer clothes, with jewelry that sparkled under the hallway lights. Her perfume was overwhelming, some expensive fragrance that made my eyes water. "You must be Lucille," she said, looking me up and down in a way that made me feel like I was being appraised and found lacking. "I am Gloria, Brianna's mother." I extended my hand. "It is nice to meet you." Gloria's handshake was limp, dismissive. She turned and walked back into the apartment without another word, leaving me to follow. The living room had been transformed into what looked like a wedding planning headquarters. Fabric samples covered the coffee table. Flower arrangements in various stages of completion lined the windowsill. A large whiteboard displayed a timeline and budget breakdown. And sitting in the center of it all like a queen on her throne was Brianna. She barely acknowledged my arrival. "Have a seat, Lucille. We are just about to start." I sat down in the only available chair, a small one pushed to the side of the room, while Gloria settled herself on the main sofa next to her daughter. Marcus stood awkwardly by the window, his hands in his pockets. Brianna began her presentation. She had charts. She had Pinterest boards displayed on a tablet. She had vendor quotes and venue brochures. The wedding she described was nothing short of extravagant. A 5-star hotel in the heart of downtown Columbus. 300 guests, flowers imported from Holland, a custom-designed wedding dress from a boutique in New York, catering by a chef who had apparently cooked for celebrities. The total estimated cost made my head spin, $150,000. I glanced at Marcus, trying to catch his eye, but he was staring at the floor. I looked back at Brianna, who was still talking about champagne selections and live entertainment options. When she finally paused for breath, I spoke up gently. "That is a lot of money. Maybe we could find some ways to save without sacrificing the beauty of the day. There are some lovely venues outside the city that might be more affordable, and local florists can create gorgeous arrangements for a fraction of the cost." Brianna's eyes snapped to mine, sharp and cold. Gloria let out a small laugh that was not friendly at all. "Money should not be an issue when it comes to the most important day of your life," Gloria said smoothly. "After all, you only get married once." I wanted to point out that plenty of people got married more than once, but I held my tongue. This was not my wedding. I was here to support, not to argue. Over the following weeks, I learned just how little my support was wanted. Every suggestion I made was dismissed. I proposed having the ceremony at the church, where Marcus had been baptized, a beautiful old building that held so many memories for our family. Brianna rejected it immediately. "That church is too small and outdated. It does not fit the aesthetic we are going for." I asked if we could make special accommodations for Marcus's grandmother, my mother-in-law, who was 89 years old and frail, but desperately wanted to see her great-grandson get married. Brianna shook her head without an ounce of sympathy. "We cannot accommodate special needs guests. It will complicate the seating chart." I offered to bake the wedding cake, a skill I had honed over decades. I had made cakes for every important occasion in Marcus's life: birthdays, graduations, holidays. It would have been my labor of love, my way of contributing something personal and meaningful. Brianna looked at me as if I had suggested we serve gas station snacks at the reception. "We already hired a professional pastry chef from New York," she said. "This is a high-end event, Lucille. We need someone with credentials." Each rejection stung more than the last, but I kept telling myself that this was her day, her vision. Maybe I was old-fashioned. Maybe my ideas really were outdated. Maybe I needed to step back and let the younger generation do things their way. Then came the moment with my mother's ring. We were sitting in their living room after yet another planning session. I had been waiting for the right time to present it, rehearsing what I would say. Finally, during a lull in conversation, I pulled out the small velvet box I had been carrying in my purse for weeks. "Brianna," I began, my voice soft with emotion, "I wanted to give you something. This ring belonged to my mother, and before that, my grandmother. It has been passed down on wedding days for 3 generations. I thought you might want to wear it as your something old." I opened the box and held it out to her. The ring glinted in the afternoon light, small but precious, full of history and love. Brianna glanced at it. Just glanced the way you might look at an advertisement you have no intention of responding to. Then she met my eyes with an expression that could only be described as pity. "That is very sweet," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "But I already have my something old planned. And honestly, this style does not match my aesthetic." I felt my hands begin to shake. My face grew hot. There was a ringing in my ears that drowned out whatever Gloria said next, some comment about vintage jewelry being quaint. I closed the box and put it back in my purse. I did not trust myself to speak. If I opened my mouth, I might say something I would regret. Or worse, I might cry, and I refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing my tears. Marcus was silent throughout the entire exchange. He did not defend me. He did not suggest that Brianna reconsider. He just stood there looking uncomfortable as his mother's heart broke quietly in a corner of his living room. That night, I drove home in a daze. I sat at my kitchen table holding that ring box in my hands and wondered when exactly I had become so invisible, so dispensable, so unwanted. But even then, even after everything I told myself to be patient, weddings were stressful. People said and did things they did not mean. Surely things would get better once the big day was over and life returned to normal. I had no idea that the worst was yet to come. 3 months before the wedding, I received another email from Brianna summoning me to a planning meeting. I almost did not go. The previous gatherings had left me feeling so small, so unwelcome, that I dreaded walking into that apartment again. But Marcus called and asked me personally, and I could never say no to my son. When I arrived, the atmosphere was even more tense than usual. Brianna was on the phone, pacing back and forth, her voice sharp and demanding. She was talking to the wedding planner about changing the reception venue to an even more expensive resort, one that would add another $20,000 to the already astronomical budget. I sat quietly waiting for her to finish. Gloria was there too, sipping wine and scrolling through her phone, completely unconcerned about the ballooning costs. Marcus stood by the window, his jaw tight, his eyes avoiding mine. When Brianna finally ended her call, I spoke up. I had rehearsed this moment in my head, trying to find the right words, the perfect balance between supportive and sensible. Maybe we should discuss this together before making such a big decision, I suggested carefully. I am contributing $50,000 to this wedding, so I thought I might have some input on major changes. The room went silent. Until that moment, I had never mentioned the specific amount I planned to give. I had told Marcus privately, and he had presumably shared it with Brianna. But we had never discussed it openly, and I had certainly never used it as leverage. I was not trying to leverage anything now. I was simply asking to be included in a conversation about a significant financial decision. $50,000 was everything I had saved over 3 decades. The settlement from Harold's death, plus years of careful budgeting and sacrifice. It was Marcus's inheritance in a way money I had always intended for his future happiness. And I was offering it willingly, lovingly, with no strings attached, except the most basic courtesy of being informed about how it would be spent. Brianna set down her phone. Slowly, deliberately, she turned to face me. Her expression had transformed into something I had never seen before, at least not directed at me so openly. It was contempt, pure and undisguised. "Lucille," she said, her voice cold and measured, "I appreciate whatever you want to contribute, but this is my wedding, my vision, my day." She took a step closer, and I instinctively leaned back in my chair. "You are the mother of the groom. That is it. You do not get to make decisions. You do not get to have opinions on things you do not understand." Each word landed like a slap. I could feel my heart pounding, my breath coming faster. And then she delivered the final blow. "So please, Lucille, just stay in your lane." Stay in your lane. 3 words, 4 syllables. A lifetime of dismissal packed into a single phrase. I looked at my son, my Marcus. The boy I had raised alone, had sacrificed everything for, had loved with every fiber of my being. He was standing there, frozen, his face a mask of discomfort. But he was not defending me. He was not telling Brianna that she had crossed a line. He was silent. "Marcus," I said, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to stay calm. "Are you going to say something?" He looked at the floor, his hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. When he finally spoke, his words cut deeper than anything Brianna had said. "Ma, Brianna is just stressed. The wedding planning is a lot. Maybe we should all calm down." Maybe we should all calm down, as if I was the one being unreasonable, as if asking for basic respect was somehow causing drama, as if his mother's feelings were just another item on the wedding stress checklist, something to be managed and minimized. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, though it was probably only a few seconds. Gloria was smirking. Brianna had already turned away, dismissing me as thoroughly as if I had ceased to exist, and Marcus, my son, would not even meet my eyes. I stood up slowly. My legs felt unsteady, but I forced them to hold me. I picked up my purse from the floor beside my chair. "You want me to stay in my lane?" I said quietly. My voice was steady now, calmer than I felt. "Fine, I will." Then I walked out the door without looking back. The drive home took 30 minutes. It felt like 30 years. Every mile forced me to replay that scene in my head, the contempt in Brianna's eyes, the smugness of Gloria's smile, the devastating silence of my son. When I finally pulled into my driveway, I did not go inside right away. I sat in my car in the dark and let myself feel everything I had been holding back, the grief, the rage, the bone-deep exhaustion of trying so hard for so long only to be dismissed as irrelevant. I thought about Harold, about the life we had planned together before it was stolen from us, about the years I had spent working 2 jobs, missing sleep, giving up any semblance of a personal life, all for Marcus, always for Marcus. And this was how I was repaid, told to stay in my lane by a woman who had known my son for 2 years, abandoned by the child I had devoted my entire existence to raising. Something shifted inside me that night. Something that had been bending finally broke. But it was not my spirit. It was my willingness to accept disrespect, my tolerance for being treated as less than. Brianna wanted me to stay in my lane. Fine. I would stay in my lane. But she was about to learn that my lane contained a lot more than she had ever bothered to notice. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I had not felt in months. The hurt was still there, a dull ache behind my ribs, but it was accompanied by something new resolve. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and composed an email. I did not write it in anger. I wrote it with the calm precision of a woman who had finally accepted a painful truth. "Dear Marcus and Brianna," I typed. "After careful consideration, I have decided to respect Brianna's request that I stay in my lane. Effective immediately, I am withdrawing from all wedding planning activities. I will not attend any more meetings, offer any more suggestions, or involve myself in any decisions. Additionally, I am withdrawing my financial contribution of $50,000. That money was offered with love, but love should be mutual. I will instead use it for my own needs. I wish you both a beautiful wedding. Lucille." I read it 3 times. Then I pressed send. The response was immediate. My phone started buzzing within minutes. Marcus called 5 times in a row. I let each call go to voicemail. Brianna texted twice. I did not read the messages. I simply turned my phone to silent and went out to water my garden. There was something liberating about that silence. For months, I had been bending over backwards to please people who had no interest in being pleased. I had swallowed my pride, ignored my instincts, accepted treatment that I would never have tolerated from anyone else. And for what to be told to stay in my lane at my own son's wedding planning meeting, no more. By early afternoon, Marcus showed up at my house. I watched through the window as he got out of his car and walked up the path to my front door. His face was a mixture of worry and frustration. I opened the door but did not invite him in. We stood there on my porch, the same porch where I had received the news of his father's death all those years ago, and I felt the weight of history pressing down on us. "Ma, please," he said. "This is a misunderstanding. We need to talk about this." "There is nothing to misunderstand, Marcus. Your fiancée told me exactly where I stand. I am simply respecting her wishes." "She did not mean it like that. She is just stressed. Wedding planning is overwhelming." I shook my head slowly. "Stress does not make you disrespectful, Marcus. It reveals who you really are. And last night I saw very clearly who Brianna is. More importantly, I saw who you are when you are with her." His face crumbled. "Ma, that is not fair." Fair. The word came out sharper than I intended. "You want to talk about fair? I raised you alone, Marcus. I worked 2 jobs for years. I gave up everything so you could have opportunities I never had. And last night you stood there and watched someone humiliate me, and you said nothing. You told me to calm down." I did not know what to do. I was caught in the middle. The middle. I stepped closer to him, my voice low but fierce. "There is no middle when someone disrespects your mother. There is right and there is wrong. You chose wrong." Marcus opened his mouth to respond, but I held up my hand. "I love you. I will always love you. Nothing will ever change that. But I am done being treated like an inconvenience. I am done giving everything I have to people who do not appreciate it. You want to marry Brianna? That is your choice. But you will do it without my money and without my participation." He stood there for a long moment, his eyes glistening. I thought he might argue more, might find the words to make things right. Instead, he just nodded, turned around, and walked back to his car. I watched him drive away, and I did not cry. I had done enough crying. Now was the time for action. What Brianna and Marcus did not know was that my financial contribution extended far beyond the $50,000 I had offered for the wedding. Over the years, I had been quietly supporting Marcus in ways he had either forgotten or never fully understood. The apartment he shared with Brianna was owned by my longtime friend, Susan. 3 years ago, when Marcus first moved in, he could not afford the full rent on his entry-level salary. So I arranged with Susan to pay half the rent each month. Marcus thought he had negotiated a discount because the building was older. In reality, I had been subsidizing his housing all along. The car he drove had been purchased with a loan from me, interest-free with a flexible repayment schedule. Marcus had made a few payments initially, but over time he had let them lapse. He still owed me $12,000. His health insurance during his first 2 years of employment before his company benefits kicked in. I had covered that too. Quietly, without fanfare, because that is what mothers do. All told, I had given Marcus close to $80,000 since he graduated college. Money he had needed. Money I had provided without question, without expectation of gratitude beyond the basic acknowledgement of family. Now, for the first time in his adult life, I was drawing boundaries. I called Susan and explained the situation. She was sympathetic and supportive. Starting next month, Marcus would be charged the full market rate for his apartment. I wrote a formal letter requesting repayment of the car loan according to our original agreement, and I made peace with the fact that for the first time in 30 years, I was putting myself first. Without my $50,000, Brianna's dream wedding quickly became a casualty of reality. The 5-star hotel was the first thing to go. Then the imported flowers from Holland, then the custom-designed dress, then half the guest list. I learned about these changes through the community grapevine. Small towns are like that. Everyone knows everyone, and secrets have a way of traveling faster than cars. Marcus's Aunt Dorothy told me about the venue change. My neighbor heard about the florist switch at her book club. Each piece of news arrived like a small confirmation that my decision had been the right one. Brianna, of course, blamed me for everything. She told anyone who would listen that I had pulled out of the wedding at the last minute out of jealousy and spite, that I was a controlling mother-in-law who could not handle not being the center of attention, that I had sabotaged her special day because I was bitter and alone. None of this bothered me the way she probably hoped it would. The people who mattered knew the truth. The people who believed her lies were not people whose opinions I valued anyway. What did affect me was watching Marcus struggle to make sense of his new reality. The first sign came about 6 weeks before the wedding, when Marcus called me in confusion. His rent had just increased dramatically, and he did not understand why. "There must be some mistake," he said. Susan always gave me a great deal on this place." "There is no mistake," I replied quietly. "Susan was giving you a discount because I was paying half your rent." Silence on the other end of the line. "What?" "For 3 years, Marcus. I have been paying half your rent. I thought you knew. Or maybe I hoped you would figure it out eventually." More silence. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head, reassessing everything he thought he understood about his financial situation. "Why did you not tell me?" "Because you did not ask, and because I thought it was what a mother does. Help her child without keeping score." The conversation ended shortly after that. Marcus needed time to process. I understood. I had dropped a lot of information on him at once, and there was more coming. A week later, he received my letter about the car loan, another piece of the puzzle clicking into place, another reminder of all the ways I had supported him that he had taken for granted. Slowly, painfully, Marcus began to see me differently, not as the meddling mother his fiancée had painted me as, but as the woman who had given him everything she had and asked for nothing in return. One evening, about a month before the wedding, he showed up at my door unannounced. This time, there was no frustration in his eyes, only shame. "Ma, can we talk?" I stepped aside and let him in. We sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I had planned his birthday parties and helped with his homework and cried over his father's death, the same table where I had written the email that changed everything. "I did not know," he said, his voice thick. "I did not know about the rent. I did not really think about the car loan. I just assumed everything was fine, that I was making it on my own." "You were not making it on your own, Marcus. You never have been. And that is okay. That is what family is for. But it is not okay to take that support for granted. It is not okay to let someone insult the person who provides it." He nodded slowly. "You are right. I should have defended you. I should have told Brianna that she was out of line. I was a coward, and I am sorry." "I know you are sorry. But sorry is just a word. What matters is what you do next." We talked for hours that night, really talked in a way we had not since he was a teenager. He told me about the pressure he felt from Brianna, the way she criticized him when things did not go her way, the growing sense that he was losing himself in the relationship. I listened without judgment, without saying, "I told you so," even though part of me wanted to. By the time he left, something had shifted between us, not fully healed, but heading in the right direction. Over the following weeks, Marcus began to see Brianna with clearer eyes. He noticed things he had overlooked before. The way she spoke to servers in restaurants sharp and dismissive. The way she treated her own family with barely concealed disdain. The way she always put her needs first, expecting everyone else to fall in line. 2 weeks before the wedding, they had a fight. A big one. Marcus told me about it afterward. "I asked if we could invite you as a guest of honor," he said. "I asked if Brianna would consider apologizing for what she said. She refused. She said she would not apologize for setting boundaries. And what did you say?" He took a deep breath. "I said that what she did was not setting boundaries. It was being cruel. And I told her that if she could not treat my mother with respect, I needed to seriously think about whether I wanted to spend my life with her." That was not the resolution to their relationship. There were more arguments, more tears, more sleepless nights. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it grew with every passing day. 2 weeks before the wedding that was supposed to unite Marcus and Brianna forever, Marcus called off the engagement. He returned the ring. He moved out of the apartment they had shared. He crashed on a friend's couch while he figured out his next steps, and he called me the night it happened, his voice raw with emotion. "I am sorry, Ma, for everything. I should have seen it sooner. I should have listened to you." "You are seeing it now," I told him. "That is what matters. We do not always get it right the first time. What counts is that we learn." Brianna did not take the breakup well. She posted on social media painting herself as the victim of a manipulative mother-in-law and a weak-willed fiancé. She called Marcus's phone dozens of times, alternating between rage and tearful pleading. Gloria called me once, screaming about how I had ruined her daughter's life. I let her vent for about 30 seconds. Then I said the only thing that needed saying. Your daughter asked me to stay in my lane. I did. And now she is learning that my lane included a lot more than she thought. I hung up and never spoke to either of them again. The months following the canceled wedding were not easy. Marcus struggled with guilt and embarrassment and the practical challenges of rebuilding his life. He had to find a new apartment, one he could actually afford. He had to repay his debts, both financial and emotional. He had to learn how to be alone in a way he never had before. But he also grew. Week by week, I watched my son transform into the man I had always hoped he would become. He stopped making excuses. He started taking responsibility. He visited me regularly, not because he needed something, but because he wanted to be there. One autumn evening, about 6 months after everything fell apart, we were sitting on my porch, watching the sun set over the Ohio hills. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, the kind of beauty that makes you believe in something bigger than yourself. Marcus reached over and took my hand. Ma, I am so sorry it took me so long to see. You were never in anyone's lane. You were the one who built the whole road. I squeezed his hand and smiled, the first genuine smile I had felt in a long time. It is okay, baby. We learn. We grow. That is what life is about. Looking back on everything that happened, I would be lying if I said I had no regrets. I regret that my relationship with my son had to be damaged before it could be healed. I regret that I spent so many months trying to please someone who was incapable of being pleased. I regret the time I wasted doubting myself, wondering if I was the problem. But I do not regret standing up for myself. I do not regret withdrawing from a situation where I was being mistreated. And I do not regret showing my son that love does not mean accepting cruelty. The healing took time. It always does. There were awkward moments and difficult conversations, and days when the old hurt would bubble up unexpectedly. But gradually the distance between us closed. Marcus became more thoughtful, more appreciative, more present. He understood now in a way he never had before how much I had given him, and he understood that my love, while unconditional, was not without boundaries. I learned something important through this experience too. For 30 years, I had defined myself by sacrifice. I was the mother who worked 2 jobs, the widow who never remarried, the woman who gave everything and asked for nothing. I wore those identities like badges of honor, never questioning whether they were serving me or slowly eroding my sense of self. Brianna's cruelty, as painful as it was, gave me a gift. It forced me to see that I deserved better, not just from her, but from everyone, including myself. These days, my life is quieter, but fuller. I still live in my little house in Ohio, still tend my garden, still make my grandmother's apple pie for anyone who wants to appreciate it. But I also do things for myself now. I joined a book club. I took a painting class. I went on a vacation to the Grand Canyon, something I had wanted to do for decades, but always put off because there was someone else who needed my time or money or attention. Marcus visits every week without fail. Sometimes he brings groceries. Sometimes he just brings himself. We cook dinner together, watch old movies, talk about his work and his friends, and his hopes for the future. He is dating someone new now, a lovely woman named Patricia, who treats me with genuine warmth and respect. I do not know if she is the one, but I know that whoever Marcus eventually marries will be someone who values family. He learned that lesson the hard way, but he learned it. As for Brianna, I have no idea what happened to her. I do not follow her on social media. I do not ask mutual acquaintances about her life. She is part of my past, a chapter that taught me important things, but does not need to be revisited. I wish her no harm. I simply wish her away. If you are watching this and you have ever been told to stay in your lane by someone who did not appreciate you, let me share what I learned. Staying in your lane does not mean accepting disrespect. It does not mean shrinking yourself to fit someone else's expectations. It does not mean giving and giving until you have nothing left, only to be dismissed when you ask for the most basic consideration. Sometimes staying in your lane means recognizing your own worth. It means understanding that your lane contains value contributions, love that others might not see until it is gone. And if they cannot see it, if they refuse to acknowledge it, maybe it is time for you to take your lane and go somewhere else. I spent 30 years sacrificing for my son. I do not regret a single moment of it. But I also learned that sacrifice should never mean losing yourself. Love should never mean accepting cruelty. And boundaries are not walls designed to keep people out. They are fences that define where you end and someone else begins. My name is Lucille. I am 58 years old, and I am finally living in a lane of my own choosing. So here is my question for you. Have you ever been told to stay in your lane by someone who did not appreciate what you bring? How did you handle it? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. Your experiences matter, and sharing them might help someone else who is going through the same thing. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to hit that like button. It helps more than you know. And if you are not already subscribed, I would be honored if you would join this community. We share stories here about real life, real struggles, real growth. No filters, no pretense, just honest human experience. Please share this video with someone who might need to hear it. You never know who is struggling in silence, who needs a reminder that they deserve respect and appreciation. Thank you for spending this time with me today. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it brought you something meaningful, whether that is comfort validation or simply the knowledge that you are not alone. Take care of yourselves. Set your boundaries. Know your worth. And remember, the most important lane you will ever be in is the one you build for yourself.